The body in early modernity and in non-Western cultures. The rigid division of bodies into male only and female only occurred at a particular moment in human history. That is, at the inception of the constellation of features that we term modernity. Thus, a set of assumptions that form common sense today were absent in Europe prior to the late 16th century and in South Asia and Africa until the early 19th century, when European modernity was universalized through colonialism. That is, assumptions such as the idea that nature exists separately from humans as a passive, inert set of resources to be put to human use, that bodies are naturally entirely one sex or another, that hermaphroditism, that is, bodies possessing both male and female sexual characteristics, is a disease, and that desire naturally flows only between opposite sexes. Anne Foster Sterling points out that in Europe, it was only by the 17th century that hermaphrodites were forced to choose one established gender and stay with it, the punishment being death for failing to do so. The key notion central to European modernity, which enables the common sense assumptions outlined above, was the putting in place of the notion of the individual, that I am this body and that myself stops at the boundaries of my skin. Although this seems an entirely natural identification to the modern mind, it is in fact only about 400 years old and has specific cultural moorings in the experience of the West. In non-Western societies, this notion of the individual separate from all other individuals as the unit of society is still not an uncontested one. At every level in non-Western societies, then, there remains a sense of self that is produced at the intersection of individuated bodies and collectivities of different sorts. Individuation, then, that is, the process of recognizing oneself as primarily an individual, is always an ongoing process in the present continuous in our parts of the world. It is against this backdrop that we must ask the question, was sex/gender a universally relevant criterion of social differentiation at all? That is, did all societies at all times and in all places make male/female distinctions that sustained themselves over stable bodies? Consider the poets of the Bhakti movement in the landmass we now call India. This movement originated in the southern part, in the Tamil region, in the 6th century CE and flourished in the north from the 15th to the 17th centuries. These mystics expressed a kind of desire for God that travels through the body and reconfigures it. Their desire was to attain the loss of maleness as power and the loss of femaleness as sexualized powerlessness. A.K. Ramanujan suggests that the lines between male and female are continuously crossed and recrossed in the lives of the Bhakti saints. They demystified the body and sexuality by dismantling the codes and conventions that sex the body. Bhakti saints turned away from sex in this world, not from fear or hatred of sexuality, but because their sexual passion was invested entirely and in a disembodied manner in the chosen deity as a lover. A 10th century devotee of Shiva, Devara Dasimaya, wrote, "If they see breasts and long hair coming, they call it woman. If beard and whiskers, they call it man. But look, the self that hovers in between is neither man nor woman." Ramanujan points out that when women saints like Lalder of Kashmir and Mahadevi Akka of Karnataka threw away their clothes, They were making us see that modesty, which is invested in hiding the body with clothes, is a way of resisting and enhancing sexual curiosity, not of curbing it. It is this paradox that is exposed when clothes are thrown away. By exposing the difference between male and female, by becoming indifferent to that difference, they are liberated from it. This is how the female saint Mahadevi Akka, who clothed herself only in her own long hair, perceives the body. You can confiscate money in hand. Can you confiscate the body's glory? Or peel away every strip you wear, but can you peel the nothing, the nakedness that covers and veils? Clearly, even by the time of the Bhakti movement, normative notions of masculinity/femininity and appropriate/inappropriate sex had come into being, against which the Bhakti saints were in rebellion. But considerable fluidity still existed even till the mid to late 19th century, when the process of colonial modernity, in alliance with the modernizing nationalist elite, began the process of disciplining it. Historical work on cross-dressing, that is, male actors playing female roles in theatre and dance in late 19th or early 20th century India, at a moment when the practice was beginning to be delegitimized by the discourses of modernity, shows that arguments about gender verisimilitude, that cross-dressing men didn't look feminine enough, were made in order to end the practice of men playing women's roles. But simultaneously, such arguments displayed an anxiety that female impersonators were so feminine that they could soil the fancy of men. Feminist scholars have shown that female impersonation, far from appearing unnatural, in fact fashioned a widely circulated standard for female appearance and modified codes of feminine conduct. Female viewers, indeed, were instructed to model themselves on the transvestite actor. The new nationalist bourgeois woman was to learn how to be a proper woman by watching the production of appropriate femininity by a male actor. This scholarship is but a tiny part of a vast field of work that tracks the ways in which the fluid identities and practices of pre-colonial societies were rendered legible to and by colonial modernity throughout the 19th century in India. The process was never completed, though, and heterogeneous forms of sexuality continue to simmer below the skin of normal society in the non-West. We should remember that processes of modernity in Europe had already performed this exercise of fixing sexual identity over the 16th to 19th centuries. In the 20th century, then, in Europe and the US, there arose significant philosophical and sociological interventions, feminist and non-feminist, that began to question the key concepts that had stabilized as natural by that time: the body, sex, sexuality.